I still remember the night everything changed, the night I stopped running. For months, I avoided my girlfriend's mother like she was a storm I didn't know how to survive. I would check the driveway before parking, linger outside until I saw her car leave, invent excuses to skip family dinners, and pretend I had deadlines when in reality, I was afraid of something I didn't fully understand. I wasn't afraid of her in the way a man fears danger. I was afraid of the way her eyes seemed to see through me, as if she knew the parts of me I barely admitted to myself. Before we go any further, if you believe in kindness, second chances, and the complicated beauty of human hearts, take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who needs a reminder that love can be messy but meaningful. Comment your thoughts, and subscribe to the channel. Stories like this deserve to be felt together. Her name was Sophia, and she was nothing like I expected when I first met her. When my girlfriend Alina introduced us, I'd prepared myself for cold judgment or polite indifference. Instead, Sophia greeted me with a softness that unsettled me. She looked tired but strong, elegant but worn around the edges, a woman who had loved deeply and paid the price for it. Alina once told me her father had left when she was 10. Since then, it had just been the two of them. Sophia worked 2 jobs for years, building a life out of scraps and stubborn hope. By the time I entered their world, things were finally stable. Alina was in university. Sophia had started her own small interior design business. They were survivors, the kind who didn't brag about their strength because they had no choice but to be strong. Maybe that's why I felt small around her. At first, I thought my discomfort was guilt. I came from a simpler background. My own parents were still together, still arguing over grocery lists and electricity bills, still showing up for each other in quiet, ordinary ways. I didn't know how to relate to the weight Sophia carried behind her smile. I didn't know how to act around a woman who had sacrificed so much. But it wasn't just admiration. It was something far more dangerous. The first time I noticed it was at dinner. Alina was in the kitchen grabbing dessert, and Sophia and I were alone at the table. We were talking about books. She had read one of my favorites, and when she described a scene that moved her, her voice trembled slightly. Not dramatically, just enough to reveal that stories still touched her in places life hadn't hardened. When she looked up at me, our eyes held for half a second too long. That was the moment I started avoiding her. I loved Alina, I truly did. She was bright, impulsive, hopeful. She believed in me when I doubted myself. We had plans, careers, travel, a future that felt open and exciting. But around her mother, I felt a pull that confused me. Not purely romantic, not purely emotional. It was something layered, a recognition, as if 2 lonely parts of us acknowledged each other without permission. So I chose distance. I stopped staying late at their house. I declined movie nights. When Sophia tried to include me in conversations, I kept things polite and brief. I convinced myself that if I acted normal long enough, the strange tension would fade. It didn't. If anything, the distance made it worse. The more I avoided her, the more aware I became of her presence. The sound of her heels in the hallway, the quiet hum of her voice when she thought no one was listening. The way she'd pause slightly before speaking, as if measuring her words carefully. One afternoon, Alina called me in tears. She and her mother had argued. It wasn't unusual, but this time it had cut deeper. Alina accused her of being controlling. Sophia accused her of being ungrateful. I drove over to comfort Alina, but when I arrived, she had already left to stay with a friend. And for the first time, I was alone in the house with Sophia. The silence felt heavy. She stood by the window in the living room, staring outside as if expecting answers from the streetlights. I should have left. Every instinct told me to create space, but something kept my feet rooted to the floor. She looked smaller somehow, not physically but emotionally. The strong, composed woman I knew seemed fragile in that moment. Without planning to, I spoke. I told her Alina didn't mean what she said. I told her she was a good mother. I told her that sometimes love sounds like anger when people are afraid of losing each other. As I spoke, her eyes filled with tears she clearly didn't want me to see. That was when everything shifted. She stepped closer, not dramatically, not seductively, just closer. Close enough that I could see the exhaustion on her face. Close enough to notice the faint scent of her perfume. She reached out and touched my hand, a simple gesture of gratitude, but it didn't feel simple. The air changed. My heart pounded in my chest like it was trying to warn me. I should have pulled away. Instead, I stayed. She looked at me in a way that felt less like a mother looking at her daughter's boyfriend, and more like a woman remembering she was still alive. There was loneliness in that gaze, and recognition. Then, before I could process what was happening, she leaned forward and kissed me. It wasn't long. It wasn't desperate. It was soft and trembling and full of something neither of us had named. The second it happened, regret flooded the room. She pulled back immediately, covering her mouth as if she couldn't believe what she'd done. I stepped away, my mind racing. The world felt tilted. There was no passion in that moment, only confusion and an ache that had been building quietly for months. I left without saying much. I walked out into the night air and felt like I had betrayed someone, even though I hadn't initiated it, even though I hadn't planned it, even though a part of me had felt the same unspoken pull. The days that followed were unbearable. I couldn't look at Alina without feeling guilt. I couldn't stop replaying the kiss in my head, not because it thrilled me, but because it forced me to confront truths I had been avoiding. I wasn't in love with Sophia, but I was drawn to her pain, to her strength, to the way she saw me as something more than a young man trying to prove himself. And that scared me. I realized something uncomfortable. Sometimes attraction isn't about romance. Sometimes it's about validation, about being understood, about feeling needed. Sophia and I had both crossed a line, not physically in any dramatic way, but emotionally, and emotional lines can be more dangerous than physical ones. A week later, she asked to speak with me privately. I almost refused, but avoiding it hadn't solved anything before. When I arrived, she looked composed again, but there was a seriousness in her expression. She told me the kiss was a mistake. She said loneliness had clouded her judgment. She apologized, not defensively, not dramatically, but sincerely. And then she said something that changed everything. She said she had forgotten what it felt like to be seen as a woman instead of just a mother. That confession broke my heart more than the kiss itself. I understood then that what passed between us wasn't love. It was two people carrying unspoken emptiness. It was proximity mixed with vulnerability. It was a moment where boundaries blurred because both of us were human. I apologized too, for not creating clearer distance, for enjoying the attention in subtle ways, for not being strong enough to confront the tension sooner. We agreed it could never happen again, not because it was scandalous, but because it would destroy too much. It would hurt Alina in ways she didn't deserve. Rebuilding normalcy wasn't easy. For a while, every family dinner felt like walking on thin ice, but something unexpected happened. Honesty created space. Sophia started dating again months later. Slowly, carefully. She began rediscovering parts of herself that had nothing to do with motherhood. Watching her step back into the world with confidence felt healing, not just for her, but for me. And my relationship with Alina grew stronger too. I learned that love isn't just about passion or comfort. It's about boundaries, about choosing the right thing even when it's uncomfortable, about understanding your own weaknesses before they hurt someone else. The kiss became a turning point, not a secret longing, not a forbidden fantasy, but a lesson about loneliness, about self-awareness, about how easy it is to confuse emotional connection with destiny. Years later, when I think about that night, I don't feel desire, I feel gratitude, because it forced me to grow up. It forced me to confront the parts of myself that sought validation in the wrong places. This story has touched your heart so far. If you've ever faced a moment where your emotions challenged your values, please take a second to like this video and share your thoughts in the comments. Your engagement helps stories like this reach people who might need them. And before we reach the end, I have a special request. Comment the word boundaries if you believe that real strength comes from choosing what's right over what's easy. In the end, no one was destroyed. No dramatic scandals, no exposed secrets, just three people who learned something important about themselves. Sophia found companionship again, this time with someone who met her in the right way, at the right time. Alina and I built a future based on transparency and trust, and I learned that being a good man isn't about never feeling temptation. It's about what you do when you feel it. Life will always test your character in quiet moments, not just loud ones, in living rooms filled with silence, in glances that last too long, in choices no one else sees. That night could have been the beginning of something destructive. Instead, it became the beginning of maturity. And sometimes, that's the more powerful love story.